What if the most critical component of a personal injury case isn't the police report or the MRI, but it's the fears, the worries, and the scattered thoughts that surface when you're alone at night with your thoughts? In this episode, we're pulling back the curtain on those first few raw weeks after an accident and how quick, coordinated mental health care can change both recovery and the outcome of a case. Hey everyone, I'm Kylie Como, legal nurse consultant here at Shane Smith Law. And in today's episode, we are back with Yisrael Sternberg and Ami Feinstein of Shefa Mental Health to talk about what really happens in the first days and weeks after an accident. What are the clients saying? How are their routines shifting? And what is the emotional fallout and why is it so often misunderstood? Yes, and Ami walk us through how their team makes it easy to get help fast and what the Shefa intake process looks like for someone who's already overwhelmed, and how their close collaboration with attorneys and case managers has positively shaped both their patients' healing and their legal outcomes. Guys, it's great to be back with you today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
We're super pumped, excited.
We hope that you caught that first episode. If not, I would highly recommend you go back and listening to that, watching that. It was chock full of some good content. It really sets up this episode. So let's get into it. So in those first few days or even weeks after, say, an accident or a traumatic injury, what are some of the most common things that you hear from clients or patients about how they're feeling and maybe how they're coping with things?
I think, sometimes there's a sense of guilt, that they did something wrong. There's maybe a sense of shame that people kind of deal with. There's also, anxiety surrounding being in a car again. So much of our life revolves. In episode 1, we talked about it. If you don't have great public transportation in your city, you're in a car going from point A to point B. A lot of these people might not realize it at first. It might take a few days or weeks, but, they could be in the passenger seat and all of a sudden they're, having an anxiety attack or very nervous. These are all things that we see and that are very common that we tried to address, during the counseling sessions.
Another thing, I'd add shock is very common. And then there's overwhelmed because they know that they have to balance regular life. And then also there's just something else that they are taken care of with going, whether it's going to chiropractors, going to PTs, OTs, dealing with the law firms. And so it's kind of, a lot of people are overwhelmed with their decisions as well. Some people have more than others. If somebody before the car accident had a hard time making decisions, then this will exacerbate that and then make it way harder for them to just deal with life.
Yes, and amen, I'll say. I'd like to throw out to our audience, especially if you're a healthcare or legal team member, if you will, what are some of the most common issues you see early in your patient or client's treatment? We'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments section below. Guys, yes, you touched on it in the first episode, that the overwhelming aspect of it all. So outside of the clinical session, how do clients tend to describe their, emotional stress to family or friends or employers, and how is that sometimes different from what they share with you guys?
Well, most of our clients are not. Most of our clients are actually keeping it to themselves. They're trying to, I'd say they'd call it manning up, or just saying that, I got it. They want to show, they want to hold on to their independence. That's something that we really touch upon in treatment very much, is actually reaching out to family members, telling them that, I didn't need the support as before per se, which they probably did, but now things have changed and I could use the support, and if they were a source of support for somebody else, it'll be harder for them to be a source of support for somebody else, and they have to communicate that to people. I can't be showing up as often as I possibly could, and I want you to know that's not something personal. So some people just verbalizing that and creating that connection is very challenging, and so that's something that we try to address. Families and social life is very important for recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it takes all kinds, right? Everybody's got different personalities, and you said it in the previous question, if it was difficult for you then, it's probably going to be more difficult for you now. So yeah, if sharing and being vulnerable and open and honest about those, very sensitive feelings and emotions was tough then, it's not going to get easier. And it may be compounded by perhaps the circle you're surrounded by isn't very touchy-feely either. So you really have to do some hard work to be really, really vulnerable in those situations, because it's still important, even though it may not feel natural, I would imagine, right?
100%, yeah.
Yeah. So, audience, I'd like to ask you. I'm sure some of you out there felt overwhelmed, by the fallout of your own injury. What made it easier, or harder for that matter, to follow through with getting that emotional or mental health care? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Fellas, could you walk us through, we touched on a little bit in that first episode, but walk us through the intake process, what that looks like to a new client who comes to Shefa, but they're feeling those feelings of being flooded or scared or just really confused. How does that look to you guys? How do you ease them into that?
I think what's very important when a client comes in is for us to be open-minded and to have in mind that, safety is of utmost importance for this client. So if we're going to have to walk them through, we're going to have to hold your hand and walk you through the process, through the intake process, whether it's for your diagnostic assessment or whether it's for your treatment, finding the right care, finding the right clinician that's going to really be able to build that safety and rapport with that patient is very important. We don't want to, push the client, so we try to work in terms of scheduling and to accommodate the client in order to create the right environment for them to grow.
Yeah, and I think you guys, again, alluded to that just a little bit before, and something that we really wanted to stress to our audience is what you guys seem to do so well at Shefa is to not just make them feel it, but to really treat that client, that patient as an individual, to get to know them and their specific injuries, whether that's, we're talking about mental health or emotional injuries, if you will. So again, audience, very, very key piece of information to pick up on there. Yes, Ami, behind the scenes, how does your team at Shefa support attorneys and case managers so that everyone is on the same page about a client's needs and progress? Because it really does take that interdisciplinary approach.
100%, 100%. Yes, absolutely. So I'll tell you, Kylie, we didn't touch on it in the first episode, and I didn't tell you this either, but basically, Yis has a clinical background, and he brings that to the table. And then I'm kind of the business development guy. My background is customer service. And so I am like a customer service fanatic, right? So yes, we are a mental health company and we're here to ultimately that's our core, that's what we do. But I think how we really stand apart is we over communicate, as much as possible, unless, some case managers are like, just send me everything at the end. But a lot of case managers, we try and respond with a sense of urgency. If somebody sends us a referral, we reach out right away. We try and get that client scheduled, ASAP. We're constantly communicating. Our intake team, they put their feelers out to kind of match the client with the correct clinician. There has to be rapport there. It's got to be someone that's comfortable. Just as a small example, I'm a Southerner, right? I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm not going to necessarily connect with somebody from Alaska or New York the same way I would from a fellow Southerner like yourself from North Carolina, right? So we kind of take that into account. Some patients are going to be more comfortable with women clinicians. Others are going to be more comfortable with, a male or a female or a Spanish speaker. So these are all things that, we kind of take into account to kind of make sure that everybody's getting the best possible result and optimal treatment for sure.
And I'm so glad you mentioned, you highlighted that. I kind of picked up that Yis was more the clinical side and you were maybe more the business, but thank you for clarifying and that's why we're happy to have both of you on, because you need both, right? For any product, and your product is great mental health care. The product can be great, but if the customer service is terrible, you're probably not going to stick with the product long, or vice versa. If you've got great customer service, but your product is junk, same scenario. So you guys are bringing it from both ends, which is why, again, we're so excited to have you on and to highlight kind of what you do at Shefa. What are some of the changes that you commonly see in a patient's daily routines, like whether it's sleep or work, or maybe it's parenting, social life, during those first few weeks after an accident? What are those big changes you commonly notice?
So you've kind of hit on all the main changes that we see. That is sleep, that is family life, social life, physical activity. We have a lot of aha moments. So, somebody will be in the grocery store or in a busy place, and they'll be like, "Hey, I'm okay now." So they'll attribute that to their treatment. Whereas a few weeks ago I would be in a panic. Right now I'm okay. So it's important to pay attention to those subtle changes and to appreciate the improvement that the client has made in treatment, because I think that is a part of the recovery. A part of the recovery is that acknowledging and noticing the changes and noticing the improvement. That in itself can take a client to the next level in their improvement and their recovery.
Those things don't happen overnight or quickly at all, do they? Is there a way to kind of give a general, time frame on how long somebody might expect to see significant progress in those areas?
There's no real time frame to be able to see significant change. Every client has a different history and has different resources and abilities. So whereas one client, a big change can take 3 to 4 weeks. Another client, that same change can take a year or 2 years, really. So we try to focus in on a certain, a number of changes that the client wants to make in the onset of treatment, so that we can create our goals to be able to measure how far the clients come by the end of the treatment, and in order to create that continuity of care.
Yeah, and I think that's a gold nugget that is just highlighted. Whether in the audience, whether you're a survivor or you're going through it right now, or you're a lawyer, a paralegal, or even a provider, a medical healthcare provider, we got to give those patients, those clients time. Just because one client or patient did it one way doesn't mean, or if you're the survivor, just because somebody who breezed right through their recovery, may not happen for you that way. You got to be patient. You got to allow the professionals to do their jobs. You got to be open and honest with them and let them help you. So again, really appreciate you highlighting that. What might be some of the most often misunderstood aspects about the emotional aftermath of an injury like this?
I would say one of the most overlooked components of the aftermath of a traumatic brain injury is, and the recovery is not just an upward battle. There will be dips, and there will be times within treatment the client will say, "Hey, this is not helping," or that it's making things worse. But consistency is key here. As long as the client is communicating with the therapist, and the therapist is communicating with the client, and there's persistence, and there's consistency in the treatment, the client will more often than not come out with a better outcome. And
I think that's great. And I think we here at Shane Smith Law, we're right there with you. You mentioned earlier about some firms or providers may wait till the very end to want all the information, downloaded all at once. We like that approach that you guys seem to take. We like to stay on top of things to make sure that the client or the patient is getting the best treatment that they can with the best providers that are available, and then we're able to help them walk through their progress. And if there's not progress being made, does a change need to be made? So we appreciate that approach, that detailed and consistent, as you mentioned, is communication approach. So very, very important. Again, it's largely driven by the participation of the client, or maybe the help from their family or circle. People fall through the cracks. How do you guys, whether it's clinical or operations, how do you work together to make sure clients don't fall through the cracks as their cases and their recoveries evolve?
Yeah, I think communication is so key, and it's for all parties. It's from the client, it's from the clinician, it's from our admin, it's from the legal teams. Just making sure everybody's on the same page, that it's responding quickly. Yas and I, we try and answer every email as quickly as possible. Our team is trained to think about the same way, to not let things fall through the crack. We try and have safety nets set up to make sure nobody's falling through those cracks. Everybody's human, so of course mistakes happen, but certainly we want to minimize that. We've been doing it for quite a while now, so we've really tried to streamline things as much as possible and make it as easy for everybody. But yeah, at the end of the day, for me, the recipe for success is just communication, right there. I mean, it sounds so simple, but really that's the key ingredient for us, and we've gotten good results with that. You know, email's great, text are great, phone calls are great. You know, whatever somebody's choice mode of communication is, we try and accommodate for sure.
Flexibility is important, but yeah, you nailed it. Communication is where it's at. And I'm sure if I had to guess, like us, we find that sometimes we have to maybe train and educate isn't the right way to put it, but our clients in how to communicate, or the whys behind clear and consistent communication are so important. Do you find yourselves having to do that with some of your patients up front at least?
Yeah, definitely. That's part of it is I think you're right, it's training them. I think one of the things that kind of sets us apart is our accessibility. You know, attorneys always have my personal cell phone number. They're able to call, text anytime. You know, obviously we have set hours, but you know, emergencies happen, things happen, life doesn't always follow that schedule. So we really pride ourselves on being accessible. You know, it's easy to reach myself or Yes. You know, you're not going up a chain of 15 different people to get to who you need to talk to. So we just want to make things as easy as possible. Really, that's kind of another key ingredient for us.
That's awesome. It's funny. I was just on the phone with my cell carrier provider before this podcast, and I had to go through 15 levels of people to get to where I was going. That was super frustrating.
Absolutely. So I've been there, man. It's not fun. Yeah.
I think we can all sympathize with that. That's the worst. And well, again, I hate it. We're right up against time. I had a couple more questions, but I'll leave you with this one. And audience, let's pause for a second. Audience, for those of you that have been involved in a personal injury case, how well did your own legal and healthcare or mental health care teams work together? And maybe what do you wish they'd have done differently? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Guys, I want you to speak to the attorneys, the paralegals, the case managers, maybe even the medical professionals. What is one practical step that they can take, like right now, to build better collaboration with mental health providers?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say for the intake teams, it's so important to ask the right questions. You know, we work with some attorneys that kind of poo-poo mental health, and others see mental health as important and a key component as chiro or pain management or ortho or any of other specialties. But it's really just asking the right questions. You know, are you having trouble sleeping? Are you having trouble eating? Are you having trouble concentrating? Have you noticed irritability more than usual? Are you nervous as a passenger? Are you nervous behind the wheel? You know, just kind of prodding a little bit and asking the questions to kind of get the gears and the juices going. A lot of times that'll trigger it, and you'd be amazed what one or two questions will do. They'll kind of just open up, and the faucet will really, like, there might be a little drip, 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 and then the intake team will ask the right questions, and then boom, they're, you know, letting it all go. So
the floodgates have opened.
Exactly. I would add also as well. I think it's important that the law firms be educated to some degree in mental health and how it relates to traumatic brain injuries, and just you know, because a lot of times a client will come in and there'll be a stigma about getting mental health treatment, and they may not want it. So if the case manager or the intake team can kind of just walk the client through what it looks like, you know, how it might help them, how it can help their case, and how could help them just live their lives better and recover, I think that'll be important as well.
And if I may, Kylie, just say real quick, because I know your audience is all over the place. You're based out of North Carolina, but I'm sure there are people from all over watching you. You know, one of the great things, I love mental health for so many reasons, but one of the reasons I really like it is we're able to really cast a wide net and help a lot of people in different parts of the country. You know, we are strictly telemed, and part of the reason is that's by design. You know, the last thing somebody wants to do after being in a traumatic car wreck is get in their car and go to an appointment, right? Most people prefer the comfort and convenience of their own home, you know, and COVID really kind of paved the way for that. So you know, we work all over. We're obviously in North Carolina, but we're in, you know, 42 other states. So we're able to help people in rural areas that maybe, you know, a couple years ago didn't have access to mental health counseling. So, you know, we don't want those people falling through the cracks just because they live, you know, an hour and a half from, you know, a brick and mortar place. We want to be able to help them too. So I think that's really key part of it as well.
Yeah, access is such a big deal. We've talked about it with a lot of providers, even some of our brain injury survivors we've had as guests on the show, that access can be a big issue. And if you don't have it, especially if you're in a rural area, or maybe you lack the financial resources or transportation, as we've mentioned a few times, it can stymie things big time. So appreciate that shout out. Well, guys, that is going to do it. That's going to wrap up this episode of Mind Matters. I'd like to give a sincere thank you to Israel Sternberg and Ami Feinstein for really illuminating the emotional challenge that follow an accident or a traumatic brain injury. Really those subtle signs that are often missed, and really, again, hope. I hope people are walking away with a sense of hope that care and recovery are accessible, but the hope that comes from receiving the right kind of support. This conversation should remind us that healing is more than just physical recovery. It's about taking care of our mental and emotional health as well. We appreciate you guys spending some time with us as our audience. We appreciate being able to discuss with Yisrael and Ami about how clients, what they reveal in those early days after an accident, how Shefa streamlines access to care, as we just talked about, and why these really strong partnerships are so critical between legal and mental health professionals, and how that can really transform your outcome. If you connected with this episode, I would invite you to please share your experience in the comments section. Your story could really encourage others. If you would, please like this episode, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. It's your engagement that helps us bring more experts like Yiz and Ami and more meaningful conversations to Mind Matters. And please remember, if you're in pain, call Shane at 980-999-9999. Take care.
In pain, so I call Shane. 980-999-9999. In pain, call Shane.